All right. It looks like we have gone green. So that means we are in broadcast mode. Welcome to everyone who has joined us today. We're going to have a little bit of a conversation about the world as we've seen it over the last month or two. My name is Adrian Ludwig. I am the Chief Information Security Officer at Atlassian, and I'll be moderating a conversation with a great set of panelists. We have Holly Allen, who's Director of Engineering at Slack. Liz Fong Jones, developer advocate at Honeycomb, and Patrick Hill, an SRE lead here at Atlassian. We're going to be talking about site reliability and how teams are doing operating services that at this point in a global pandemic that we're all fighting through have become critical to the way that not only we're doing business, but companies around the world and people around the world are doing business. We've seen the world, at least the outside part of the world, pause, but online we've seen incredible increase in activity. Cloud services have become a lifeline for communication, for schools, for families, for businesses. And with that have come increased expectations around reliability. So we thought it'd be helpful to bring together some of the experts running some of the world's most important services to help talk through some of the things that they've been experiencing and also have an opportunity to answer questions that you might have in the world that you've been experiencing as well. A bit on the format, we'll do a little bit of an intro and then talk through a handful of questions that the panelists have discussed before. Thought that would be interesting and relevant to all of you. And from there, we will go into open question and answers. We are using Zoom, just like hundreds of millions of other folks around the world. You've probably gotten familiar with it by now, but if not, down at the bottom of the screen, you should see a little Q&A, and you can go ahead and type in your question. I can see those questions, the panelists can see those questions. We may just weave them into the conversation, or towards the end, we'll certainly make sure that we get in there and directly address the questions that you ask. So feel free to ask questions at any time. So with no further ado, I will ask Holly to give us a minute or two about your background and some of the experiences that you've been seeing over the last, well, let's say last month or so.
Yeah, so I'm the head of reliability at Slack, and the last month has been pretty interesting, of course. We were not a remote first kind of office at all. We were definitely the kind of company where everyone comes into the office and works together. And so the shift to everyone working from home was pretty dramatic. And at the same time, we saw about a 30 or 40% increase in our traffic. And so the good news is that the technology, for the most part, scaled cleanly. There were some fire drills, of course, but it's really been the people aspect that's taken a lot more sort of care and feeding and evolution to make sure that everyone is able to be productive at home in a way that works for them.
Cool. Yeah, we've definitely seen that, and our big users of Slack. So we've seen it scale perfectly. I haven't seen any issues, but yeah, I know that what I see is not reality in some cases. Liz Fong Jones.
Y'all didn't just, y'all at Slack didn't just scale up. You also scaled up and launched the new Slack sidebar, which was super exciting, and my team was cheering when it happened. We've seen at Honeycomb, so at Honeycomb we support a large number of unicorn companies, public companies, and of course Fortune 50 companies. So we're very, very critical in terms of helping people maintain that quality of service, both for their own employees as well as for their customers. But interestingly enough, our traffic in terms of incoming telemetry has been more or less flat because of the fact that people dynamically sample, people take other measures in order to make sure that the cost of their telemetry doesn't go up too much with the cost of increased traffic.
Interesting. I hadn't, that's an interesting shift that people have brought into the way that they were thinking about. That's great to hear. Patrick, do you want to give us a minute?
In terms of the remote work thing, Honeycomb was already 50% remote employees, so the 50% of our San Francisco-based employees started working from home. It's obviously a thing where they've gotten better and better at it, but also we were doing dry runs for this kind of scenario. We actually were prepared to lose our office back in August or September and not be able to get a new lease immediately before we raised our most recent funding round. So we had already been doing dry runs of like do a week work from home for like, you know, out of every 8. So this was kind of, okay, let's operationalize this.
Interesting. That's the first time I've heard someone say that they had started thinking through that aggressively. So it's interesting. We'll get into that more, I bet. Patrick, do you want to give us a little bit of your background and how things have been going here at Atlassian?
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. I've been managing incidents at Atlassian now for what feels like ages, but it's only been 7 years. Over the past couple of months, 30th of March, we saw a triple-digit increase in the amount of free signups we have. We now offer free products to our customers in the cloud, so go check that out. We're also been, scaling out and trying to help organizations and companies and teams that have been, impacted by COVID and the pandemic. So if you do need help, we do have some help online available for that, be it remote work practices or even help with, maintain to use Jira or Confluence or any of our other products. On the actual, technical front, we have seen several services had to scale up quite dramatically. We brought forward some work to help them continue to scale and grow for our customers. We've been hard at work instrumenting them and making sure the users still get a great experience. For us, I think it's still in a pretty good state right now. I think we're still progressing as per normal. We haven't seen too many, rocky moments along the way. But what we were really focusing on is the people aspect of it. And I just want to call that out for everyone who's listening in. Make sure that your teams are healthy, make sure your teams are safe, and make sure your teams are running optimally. But maybe asking them how they are in the morning, that may be, changing up work patterns, but I know Atlassian's always been strong on that.
Yeah, it's interesting that three very different experiences, right? One, quite a bit of growth, one fairly stable, but all three of you immediately latched onto the people side as I think a bit of a surprise. Are there specific elements that you would say are unexpected? And I'm going to start with Liz here because it sounds like they were already planning ahead. And so I'm curious if there are things that were still surprising, even though that you've been thinking about this in terms of the impact it's had on your teams.
I think definitely we had just invested in a bunch of video conferencing hardware for our San Francisco office, and suddenly realizing that we were in the scramble along with every single other company to get people nice microphones, to get people nice webcams so that we could actually hear each other on calls. That I think was definitely a surprising thing, because there's a huge difference between what you can tolerate with like one or two people who are on a, not so great connection or not so great microphone versus when everyone is spending all of their days in meetings with people who all have, setups that need tweaking. That's
interesting. I know that at Atlassian, we set up a stipend basically for people who are going to be working from home. I don't know that we'd expressly said you should spend it on high quality microphones. So if my microphone sucks, I apologize.
There's a GitLab guide. GitLab published a guide to here are some things you may find helpful for remote work. They're an all remote company. And they explicitly say, you should pick at least 5 things out of this list. Talk to your manager if you're not sure, right? And it implicitly gives you that permission.
It was funny when Adrian mentioned that, because there was a bit of a mad scramble internally for everyone to get a work from home set up. So in Slack and in Confluence, we saw people spin up pages. One of them was started off with a nice little page on what chair you should get, right? For your body type, or what you might find interesting. Where's a good deal? Where's it still in stock even? And then that started expanding into other accessories. So whenever certain suppliers like Dell, for example, were able to get monitors in stock, people were able then to get their work from home setup done. And you think you saw that really good team effort and team collaboration from the get-go, which is always something that I find really reassuring personally. I know that, everyone immediately went oh crap, I have to work from home now. What is that going to mean moment? And then for the whole, our whole internal community to come together and say, it's okay, here's what you should be looking at, has been a real good thing for us.
Holly, you were the biggest shift. You're jumping in. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we have a fun channel as well. We have a couple for sort of work from home equipment, but we have this really fun channel that I love, which is people's work from home setups. And you get to see sort of how they evolve as they get more stuff. You get to have some inspiration from folks, and it also just sort of brought us a little bit back together, right? Just being able to sort of see where everyone's working helped you feel closer to everybody. I think back to what was a surprise, one of the surprises for me as a manager was that the number of people who were less productive at home for a variety of reasons are almost exactly balanced out by the number of people who are more productive. We've of course been doing these internal surveys, and it's almost a perfect curve. Most people are more in the I'm almost as productive, right? Like 80-90% is productive, but there's a little bit going on there. But I was really surprised at how that all kind of balanced out. And we just went through a quarterly planning process, and it's like we could basically get almost as much done as before if you look at it in a large enough sample.
I'm curious there. You feel like you could get as much done. Are there changes that you've been thinking about introducing to your planning process to help with that from a reliability standpoint?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the number one thing for any group trying to get work done, reliability or not, is just, okay, but we should really just focus, right? Any moment that you can take to focus your efforts is good. And so we definitely did that this time and said, okay, let's make sure that we're putting more wood behind fewer arrows, as they say. And then the other thing is to be even more crisp and clear about what your priorities within those commitments are, so that I have no idea how the next 3 months are going to unfold since given the last month. And so how do we make sure that when those shocks kind of happen, we can absorb that and still get the most important work done, and have sort of cleared with ourselves what that work looks like beforehand.
I think another interesting element here is thinking about the team as the unit of planning, right? Like not the individual. So kind of having larger teams, right? Like maybe instead of having one person on call, you put 2 people on call so that they can cover for each other when they're parenting, right? Make sure that we have some slack in the kind of systems like tense or loose sense, not the product, in terms of making sure that we have the ability to say no to work that is just going to fill the time and not necessarily actually get done.
Yeah, definitely. One thing we've called out also against that buddy system internally here. One thing we've also suggested people to do is, kind of report in on the temperature, right? I don't want to be as myopic as saying you need SLOs for your team, but in some cases you do need people to kind of say, hey, sorry, I'm not operating at normal capacity today. Can you kick the can down the road in a couple of meetings? Can we delay stuff? Can we be a bit more, mindful and caring about how we're running our teams?
Yep.
One other
Technical
thing you want to
term,
call
right?
out,
Like it's load shedding except
Yep,
for
yep.
instead of for computer systems for people.
Definitely. The other thing I want to call out, and I'm not sure how many of you do this or if other people do this out in the wild, is always calling out that keeping the lights on is always number one priority, and then everything else comes second. I have had personal experiences with that and going, no, I need to deliver or ship this thing today, and then someone going, yeah, but your service is down, so what are you doing?
Something that's been really helpful to me as a leader is having our executives always saying that actually the number one is your health and safety and that of your family. Then number 2 is keeping the lights on and keeping everything reliable. And then everything else comes after that. And of course, I believe in that, but it just makes it easier when everyone at the company is really echoing that. And making that safe space, right? For, hey, I just need to take the day off. I don't need a reason. I can't do it today. Just making that be safe.
Yeah.
And that not just for parents, right? But also for people with health conditions, people with mental health issues, or just in general, right? Like we are all working from home during a pandemic.
Yeah, it's been amazing to find out. I kind of enjoy getting a glimpse into people's homes and a glimpse into their life. And I've had several conversations with folks that, yeah, I meet with them once a month and I talk about, like finance or something specific like that. But when you start the conversation with, hey, how are you doing today? And then 15 minutes into that conversation, you realize you've learned more about this person than you had in the last 3 years of working with them. There's a lot of sort of shared humanity and compassion that's going around, which has been great. Are there particular techniques that you've found that have been helpful for encouraging, sort of that sense of compassion? Patrick mentioned sort of doing a basic check-in. Liz was talking about load shedding and making sure that you've got some redundancy in the system. Other things that teams should be thinking about from a people standpoint that you found that are effective?
So one thing that I think our Trello team has done for a long while is have a lot of social time in the calendars. And this means talking to people in other teams you don't interact with normally, going from a town hall style meeting and then breaking up into random groups sometimes, putting in time for coffee in the day, right? Like I think it's very easy for some of us to be able to get up and just go get a coffee, and then sit back down. But I think it's much more engaging to then sit there and have that coffee with someone else, right? And chat about what's going on. One of my team members is actually looking at buying a new house, and we're talking about, I live in Austin, and he's talking about, hey, which part of Austin should we be looking at? Where should we be thinking about? My response was always, hey, maybe not now, but yeah, it's an important thing to understand, yeah, where people are at outside of work and outside of the day-to-day responsibilities.
Holly, I think you were going to jump in there as well.
I was going to say the exact same thing. We
Social
have
hours.
team level sort of afternoon coffee times. I do kind of group level happy hours from like 4 to 6 every couple of weeks. Like recreate those hallway moments for us to connect as human beings really helps not only just sort of make a space where people can actually say what's on their minds, but also it helps us help each other when those moments come and understand, say, when somebody takes the day off and not have it affect team morale, right?
Yeah, I think there's this really interesting Slack bot that's called Donut that you can pay a certain amount per member per month, and it lets you basically create these big breakout sessions where you can assign, like, 3 people to all cluster together from your company, right? Selected at random or selected from a channel to all meet with each other and get coffee.
That explains why I keep ending up in these chats. We have Donut. We have been using it, and I do keep getting dropped in. We have a once a month like lunch sort of thing where we just get randomly selected. I didn't realize that was a service that we were paying for, but all right, there we go. I'm super curious if there are things that you've tried that have flamed out completely. There's no guarantee that any of you have to respond, and if there hasn't, that's okay. There's one thing that. Oh, okay, go for it.
So the first big push was, let's have fewer meetings, right? Great. But one of the things that we tried that totally failed was moving some meetings to completely asynchronous, and it was just no good. I'm not gonna say everything has to be a meeting, but some of these bigger meetings just could not move to an asynchronous only format, and we ended up dropping that after about a week. And then in my own staff meeting, I moved half the agenda to in channel and then half to still be in the meeting, and took the meeting to half its size. But I found that after about a month, I still wanted to bring those topics back into the room just to like resettle synchronously, and then I'll like pop them back out. So that's sort of one failed experiment and one half success.
There's definitely an art to knowing, right? Like, when is it time to take the comments off the PR and into having people talk face-to-face virtually?
Nice.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is if you have, so I work in a remote team. We work around the world. We are always usually dialing in from home at some point. Just because you used to have asynchronous stand-up at the end of your sunlight hours doesn't mean that that's going to work moving forward. So both Holly's mentioned async, Liz has mentioned how to then escalate things out of async formats into synchronous formats. Be mindful of that. I know in my team, we've had people who have actually wanted to have a proper conversation to start the day during stand-up, which is fine. Just more that, not the ritual or time for that potentially. So how can we then include that in our practices moving forward?
For us, it was kind of interesting in that we moved away from a video stand-up because our teams were getting too big. We are actually growing slightly during a pandemic, which is interesting, right? Which means that we had new hires starting, and suddenly our stand-up was, I think, like 12 or 14 people. And it was like, you know what, like, this isn't working anymore. What we're saying is not relevant to each other. Like, let's make it async, or let's break into smaller groups.
Yeah, we've had a bunch of new people start as well. In fact, I was talking with one of them this morning that has never seen The Office. Has never actually met any of the Atlassians in person. It's a very different experience from when I joined, that's for sure. It'll be interesting to see how that tracks over time and what the effects are. That might be a good webinar discussion to bring in a bunch of people who've gone through that experience and see how that shapes out.
Yeah, and also relevant to our SRE theme. Relevant to our SRE theme, we actually had someone do his first on-call shift during this transition, and it was kind of really exciting to kind of see how we helped each other through it.
Nice. Yeah, it's good stuff. Changing topics a little bit, Holly mentioned that Slack has seen an increase. I'm wondering if there are other sort of different changes in demand that you've been seeing. I was reading an article earlier today about electricity consumption in New York. There's amazing data on that. Overall, it's down, but it's shifted dramatically from enterprise/company paid bills to being consumer paid bills. So there's also like a financial impact in terms of the way that that's shifted around, and it's different times of day and all kinds of complexity in the way that that system is being forced to adapt. I'm wondering what kinds of things that you've been seeing in your services as well.
We had a number of very large global hackathons join Slack really rapidly. And I think that's just sort of a very fast cycle, you know. The scale of those teams coming in might normally come through a sales engagement and you'd see them coming from a mile away, but instead it's like last minute and you have to make sure that that group is going to be successful. I don't think that we've seen
people related to COVID-19 or just
yeah, exactly. COVID-19 hackathons that are getting spun up obviously very rapidly. But in terms of sort of self-service teams getting started and our enterprise business, those I think are about the same.
Yeah, we've also, in the kind of DevRel business, we've seen a lot of conferences move to online and try to reproduce the hallway track by having Slack workspaces for it. So I suddenly find myself in, you know, 5 times as many Slack workspaces, each of which has, you know, several hundred or several thousand or even tens of thousands of members. It's really fascinating.
We've seen, we've seen a couple of our customers come to us and go, actually, we want to 4x or 5x our certain license usage for certain things. And then we've had to turn around and go, oh, okay, to Holly's point, yeah, usually you get a bit more of a time on that. The response from them sometimes has been, actually, we want it next week. So can you get the ball rolling on that? I think to what Liz just said there as well. Someone popped this up to me the other day. There's an Animal Crossing DevOps conference coming up. Which
Desert Island DevOps.
Yes, I couldn't remember the name, sorry. But yeah, that just sounds like an amazing experience to do something a bit different.
Oh man, yeah, I think we should definitely discuss video games at some point here. It's a critical part of the way that people are getting stuff done, for sure.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, and we're seeing like a lot of interest from video game companies. We're seeing a lot of interest from healthcare companies, obviously, as well as kind of communication service companies, right? Like, lots of industries are going up at the same time, right? And it's very much making up for the kind of decline in business from other sources.
Yeah, we saw one of the companies that's involved in like home delivery increase by, I think, an order of magnitude in the span of 2 weeks. You know, and there were the public reports about Amazon adding 100,000 people. So we're definitely seeing shifts in both directions, that's for sure. Are those things that your teams have had to make special accommodations, or are those the types of things that you're ready to go and it was just exciting that things are moving more quickly?
We haven't noticed any major faults in scaling up, but we have brought forward some pieces of work. So there is a capacity project that got, basically we took the first steps in it during a recent hackathon, and then that revealed most of the value. And now the team is working on, cool, how can we make this a reality? I don't want to encourage people to ship large pieces of work in 24 hours though. That's got the complete anti-pattern of what you should be doing now. What I would encourage teams though is to think about, cool, what's changed? What's a new reality, right? I think for quite a few of us, just because your growth curve was hopefully looking like a hockey stick, that hockey stick maybe has gotten a bit sharper recently. So look at those patterns, look at those assumptions you had in place, see if you do need to redesign things. Only because we all know the lead time on rebuilding or redesigning system can be really long and can be really short, depends on what it is, but you don't want to find out about it when it's broken.
Like Patrick, we got lucky that one of the systems that really needed to be changed because of the scale, we already had the design in our pocket. It was going to be a quarter-long project, and we got it done in just a couple of days. And so that was very fortunate. And luckily, also, it was a smooth piece of work. But for the most part, the systems just scaled as they were supposed to automatically, which was also really heartening, like to see, oh, look, it worked.
Yeah, when you have the right automation in place, right? Like every time you add a customer that adds 10% to your workload, right? It's just adding 10% to your workload, right? You don't want to end up in a situation of overnight doubling your workload, right? Like that can create a lot of strain, but if you're used to kind of steady growth and it's just happening more often, that feels fine.
Well, it's cool to hear that at least on the sort of cloud services side, the sort of shifts in demand are not being nearly as disruptive as they are in the real world, where supply chains don't have that kind of flexibility. We're still looking for toilet paper. But if you haven't,
and also, right, like Azure ran out of servers briefly, right? Like, so it's not
oh,
that,
interesting.
yeah, you know, all of these things are ultimately backed by real computers that someone has to go to a data center to maintain.
We haven't had that problem. I will flag one thing that we have run into, which is there are certain parts of the world right now where you just can't get laptops. So we've had new employees onboarding. It's like, so you're going to be working from home and you're going to be working on whatever computer you can find. And once, you know, couriers become a legal thing, and once the laptop supply chain has sorted itself out, we'll equip you properly. But in the meantime, you know, 10%, 20%, do what you can.
Yeah, InfoSec people must be having an interesting day. I bet the folks working on endpoint security are doing a thriving business.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about that. My team was not super excited to hear that, though. You're right. But that gets at a good point. Like, are there any sort of longer term trends that you see right now that you think are going to dramatically change the way your team, either your team needs to work or the way you're thinking about infrastructure?
I think that a lot of this for us validates our decision at Honeycomb, given that we were a 50% remote organization, to build in these functionalities into our product to make it so that you could share your Honeycomb queries in Slack, or to look through someone else's query history to build on their queries, right? Like that kind of ability to virtually look over someone's shoulder without having to physically sit and look over their shoulder. That was something we'd already invested in, and now it's kind of a thing where it's like, this is table stakes, right? Like this is not a nice to have, this is a must have for today's era.
Yeah, you know, at Slack, obviously, we put all of our work and communication in Slack, and so that has continued to work. And I would say it's been pretty seamless. So the jury's still out on whether or not that's going to change anything after all of this is over. But I think it's proven just how effective we can be even in this kind of circumstance, which is heartening.
Yeah, it'll be nice when we think about an office as a luxury rather than a necessity. Sorry, apparently something is being printed on my printer that's next to me.
Speaking of which, you know, office as a necessity, right? Like people need working spaces. It could be at their home, it could be like in a physical office, but like it needs to be a place where you can sit and go heads down, right? Like that's what I discovered in my first month of working from home. I was like, oh goodness, there are now 4 people trying to all have meetings at the same time in the same room upstairs. So I was like, okay, I'm getting my own working space. I'm sorry, I love you dearly, but like we need more capacity.
On a similar kind of thing, I've got friends all around the world, but then a lot of them travel for work, basically. So they might live in their apartment like, I don't know, 1 week a quarter, and now they're like, cool, I haven't got any furniture because I'm not here. And now they're adjusting to that reality. I have other friends who, you know, are sitting there going, hey, living in New York, maybe not the greatest decision right now, but, you know, I think no matter where you are, well, to Liz's point, you need a space where, you know, you feel like you've got enough equipment, where you've got enough space, where you can think freely, and be able to, I think, work with your team.
Kindergarten is learning how to use rulers today, so the worksheet has now been
glimpses into people's personal lives.
Here you go. Bye. Thinking beyond sort of team dynamics and even the interactions sort of with your apps, are there things that you're seeing at the sort of core infrastructure level? Network congestion is something that people have flagged.
There's some really interesting data out of Catchpoint. Catchpoint is a similar to it's a CDN-ish, or sorry, it's not a CDN. It's a system for monitoring your CDN. And they have reported something like 50% of reported speeds in certain parts of Chicago, right? Like, so that's definitely pretty congested. The other capacity planning thing is a lot of people's internet connections are set up for one video link, not multiple video links. My household is very nice that we have a 50 megabit up connection. Other people do not have that luxury, right? And they're having to contend on very, very poor bandwidth.
To Liz's point, yeah, I'm logging my fiber connection right now. I know people who have had battle with that and had to switch between their, I'm not going to name the brand, but their cable internet and then their tethered mobile phone. cell phone and then go back and forth depending on what the weather is outside at certain points during the day as well. The, the one thing that I have found interesting with it is people become very sensitive to services going down, particularly things like Slack, right? Like as soon as there is a network interruption, they're like, hey, is Slack not working? And then you get someone calling you on your phone saying, hey, I couldn't send you a message or I couldn't call you up or something like that. And you're going, no, it's your internet. It's okay. It's going to be fine. Everything's working normal. So I think people have been really sensitive to network interruptions. I know there was a provider that had 2 fiber lines cut last week at the same time. That caused us internally to go, hey, is that VPN down? No, it's just routing. We'll figure out a way around it. So
it definitely lays bare this idea of service level objectives, right? Like, where we say, we're aiming for 3 nines or 4 nines, right? And it turns out that a lot of that error budget winds up being spent on things outside of your control.
Correct. And then, yeah, the other thing is, I just want to call out is like human expectations, right? A lot of us for the longest time, as Liz has mentioned, have expected our network just to be there and just be available all the time. In our home environments, we haven't planned for that, I don't think. Like, I'm not sure, Liz, if you have, but I know for me, I've just got the biggest connection I could. That doesn't actually mean that it's what I need, but I haven't actually done capacity planning on my home network. Some of our SREs have, and they're telling me, hey, I've had to start rate limiting certain things inside my network. I would encourage you all to look at that maybe if you are living with contention. There are some great, I think one of the people until they were raving about the new Ubiquity setup. Go check that out. But again, having to do capacity planning and things like that inside your own home network has been a really interesting experience for some people.
I had my internet down for 4 days last week, and it was incredible when I was on the phone with the provider and they said it was going to be 4 or 5 days before the tech could come out. I'm like, no, that's not possible. That's like telling me I can't have water or that my air is going to be shut off. But I was extremely pleased by how good my cell phone tethering was. I was actually able to get almost everything done, except there was no video happening.
Yeah, I remember the debate in my household a year and a half ago about whether to spend the extra $50 a month or whatever it is to have business class as opposed to, I don't know if it's good or not, but it's working. And it turns out we do have 5 video streams now at a time because kindergarten apparently has to have Zoom. I'm noticing now that we've got one question that came in. For folks that are listening in, absolutely would love to hear more of your experiences or any questions that you have. So as a reminder, there is the little Q&A pod down at the bottom, and we'll be getting into those questions here shortly. One of the things that I know folks were interested in talking about was some of the experiences that they've had sort of helping out. I don't know if there are any of those that in particular that you could share or things that you could talk about.
I'm reading the question, and I would say the #1 reason having like, hi, I am on litigation hold due to multiple lawsuits involving Google. You do not want people doing e-discovery on WhatsApp groups. You will inevitably get sued. You will inevitably have to do e-discovery. Please centralize your communications on something your organization controls. Otherwise, your employees will literally be turning over their cell phones, including all of their WhatsApp and not just their work WhatsApp, and it will be bad. That is what I would recommend to answer that question. Like I'm not shilling for Slack. We are a customer, but like that is my painful, hard-won experience.
Yeah, definitely don't use consumer stuff for enterprise or business related activities. That's probably one thing I actually do want to call out, although we are in our own homes. And I think Adrian mentioned this before with using your own devices and stuff. Please don't, wherever possible. Please use what your company provides you as much as possible. Just wanted to call that out.
Yeah, absolutely. Like no matter what communication platforms you choose, make sure that they're enterprise and built for business and not built for consumers, because get your corporate lawyers involved. That's what I would say.
It's so nice to have someone not on the security team make those arguments. It's great.
Back to Adrian's question around helping out. We have mentioned it before, but it's not just, I think people need to take time off on call. It's also, saying, hey, I need to go complete this like chore or activity, right, to go help someone else out. Just yesterday, one of our incident managers on call goes, hey, my car has finally been fixed, so now I can do my shopping. Can someone please spot with me for an hour or two so I can go and get supplies? And everyone's like, yes, of course. Like, you don't need to ask twice. Yeah.
There are all kinds of funny stories. Like one of my coworkers literally drove to a flour mill to distribute flour in industrial quantities to his neighbors, and that was what he needed on-call cover for 2 hours for.
I've got two stories. I took half a day the other day to do volunteering at a food bank, and that was great. And I know other people who are able to start doing things like that. And then Slack itself did something that I thought was really great. Doctors and medical professionals were having trouble in other spaces, knowing that they were talking to other doctors about COVID related things. And so we partnered with ID.me who does identity verification, to create a Slack workspace where only medical professionals can join it. So that they know, okay, I'm only talking to other medical professionals about the problems at hospitals or the problems in research or whatever the case may be.
That's an interesting challenge, actually. Because yeah, we need to have effective global sharing of information, but the reliability of that information doesn't necessarily seem to be going in the right direction at a global level. So that's great to hear. That's a really cool suggestion. One of the things that I've seen that Atlassian has done that I thought was really interesting, our workplace experience team, which normally would be like making sure that our offices are working and people are having communication, they're keeping busy. One of the things that they've done, they went out and they bought like gift certificates and all kinds of different things from the various different office areas, so each of the different office locations. And then they're doing a charity auction inside the company. So they've already, from the get-go, made a contribution locally in each of the different areas. And then in addition to that, the proceeds from that auction are going to go to other nonprofits that need help. So I just thought that was a really elegant sort of approach for them to be able to help out in sort of two different directions at the same time. And the employees were excited to see it. It's like, oh, I forgot about that place down the street that I can order cheese from. Apparently it'll deliver to my house. So that's...
Yeah, we did a similar thing, except for we are getting, I think, a $50 per week stipend for ordering out, so people can support their local businesses.
That's cool. That's cool.
To that point, we have had people in SRE, I know, take their lunch hour together of sorts if they're in the same time zone, and then all get Uber Eats or something like that, and then all expense it together. And that recreates the team lunch environment. Now, not everyone can do that, but something to think about. Again, support the local businesses that aren't running right now where possible.
So I'm not seeing a ton of additional questions here. Are there additional things that the folks on the panel wanted to make sure that we got some insight into, or that you wanted to share with listeners when you have a chance?
One of the things I wanted to share that I've been working on recently is I've been working on opening up office hours to replace the kind of conference hallway conversations I'd otherwise be having. So it's been a really exciting thing to be like, hey, like, you know, if you're working in the medical industry, if you're working in the banking industry, or if you're working in whatever industry, like, you know, please, like, come on by, like, you know, anyone can book 30 minutes on my calendar, and kind of those kinds of spontaneous connections I found to be super, super interesting and super, super cool. Like, I'd really encourage people to like think about how can I share my expertise outside of my company as well as within my company.
I'm doing something similar. You know, the security team at Atlassian is about 85 people at this point, globally distributed. We've got people in Austin, Texas, Sydney, Australia, and then strewn about the, you know, everywhere in between. It used to be that I started my day with like an hour of quiet time to myself to get through email and then sort of conclude the end of the day the same way. What I've done is I've declared that to be office hours. I'll just sit here, I'll open up a Zoom, just sort it over to the side, just sucking up bandwidth, because that's, you know, what people like me do. And then it's on my calendar and anybody can just drop in. And pretty much one or two people a day drop in. You know, they're working on a technical thing, they're working on a personal thing, they just want to say hi, whatever. And it works out pretty well. It's kind of a neat approach to get some of those discussions going as well. Oh, we're starting to get some questions. Any other suggestions that people have seen or experiments they've tried around flexing of hours? I know I now have a very different schedule than I used to, because I have to help set up Zoom meetings for children in the morning. Other things that people have been seeing?
So
Yeah, we're heavily supporting flexible hours and flexible schedules. And of course, I'm flexing my hours as well. And the thing that has to go along with that is the assurance to folks that this isn't in any way going to negatively reflect on people's performance, right? It's still all about, like, we're a team, to Liz's point, like the unit of planning, the unit of delivery is the team, and that we're all in this together. And being flexible with each other just helps the team do that.
Yeah, I've had a couple people on our team, the Brewers for a team at Atlassian, either change their hours, shift their hours, set up blocks in the middle of the day. Because I work in Austin, and then I have people I have to work with in the Bay Area, and then Sydney, and then India as well. I've tended to take off blocks of time in the middle of my day, and I would encourage anyone who needs to do the same. Don't feel like you have to change yourself to your desk for 14 hours. Set aside blocks of time and try and reduce down your direct working hours, and then have some time away to go, deal with other things if you need to do that. For those, and we mentioned it before, who need the time to take care of the people they live with, their family, whatever, take that time, right? Like I would seriously challenge anyone that says, no, you have to change your desk for your whole shift or anything like that. Yeah.
Oh, I was on mute. How many times have you not heard that in the last month? There's another good question here, which actually I'm super intrigued by, which is around balancing feature development and reliability. And I'm curious whether, the person asking the question here, I'll extend the question a little bit. Have you seen changes in the things that are coming out of dev teams in terms of the impact on reliability? Have you proactively or reactively made changes in terms of shipped schedules or changes to quality or anything along those lines?
You should be shipping more often, not less often in this time, right? Like, it was amazing to see people pull together and ship things, right? Like, I think we heard both Atlassian and Slack, right? Like, pulling together and shipping things in like a 24-hour, 48-hour window because they were suddenly really important, right? So if you don't have that hygiene and an infrastructure set up to be able to ship quickly and respond to needs, like, now is a good time to invest in it, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, go ahead.
To back up and expand on Liz's point, you have to really trust the mechanism and tools you have in place. Previously, I know in offices, we would probably sit there and just lean over and say, hey, can you check out this PR for me, right? And someone go, yeah, I haven't had my coffee yet, so I'm probably not paying attention, tick, fine, move on. Whereas now, we don't have that direct social interaction, right? So you really have to trust what tools, mechanisms you have in place to kind of tackle those. You won't have the opportunity to do a face-to-face review potentially for everything, so just keep that in mind. You really have to lean on the automation that you have in place, and to Liz's point, if you haven't got it, then start investing, because there's definitely not a better time.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's a false dichotomy of reliability versus shipping features. One thing that we have in place at Slack is any project that's going out that is sufficiently large, which isn't that big, has to go through sort of a final review process. And that's where we just do like a double check on quality, on your monitoring setup, on your team's alerting and paging, things like that. And I would say that, and I run that for the reliability portion. And I will definitely say that I have a little bit of heightened scrutiny now, but that isn't sort of systematic. It's just like, I'm very well aware that everyone is relying on Slack, and we have these big features going out, and I want them to hit well.
Yeah, I think it goes down to this idea of, what is your service level objective? Was your previous SLO correct, or was it too lenient, or was it too strict, right? Like, now is the time to revisit that and then continue to make data-driven decisions based off of that SLO.
We have the same process here, Holly, so let's compare notes after this. But yeah, we would have, I think, actually more services and more teams coming to SRE and asking for advice on how to ship something now. I just wonder, is that digitizing previous physical interactions, or is this something new? Are people sitting at home going, I don't have, the psychological safety of my team to then say this is fine to ship, right? And then now they're actually taking a real honest assessment of where they're at. Yeah, I find that really interesting. We've definitely seen the same amount of changes roll through compared to normal back in the office days. That sounds like a weird thing to say, doesn't it? Back in the office days, but that's because I think we've invested quite a bit in making sure that those pipelines work correctly.
Yeah, I'm just imagining now that people are like, if I break the bill, they're going to come to my house. There's another great question in terms of flow of information, and now you've got a lot more sort of online meetings and no whiteboards and things like that. Are there tooling changes or process changes that you've put in place around documenting just how decisions are being made and how that stuff is coming together? Are people actually typing while they're in Zoom, or is that no longer happening?
I'm doing that. I'll usually keep the meetings for the minutes for the meetings that I'm running. But it is maddening because at least when you were in the office, you could say, like, please close your laptops, right? I felt a little bit like a school teacher having to tell people, but I can't do that now. And I know they're multitasking. And I would say that the documentation is fine and hasn't changed. It's the, how do you keep everyone engaged in the meeting? But I'll take half of that on myself and say, I have to present an engaging meeting that people want to not be multitasking during.
I 100% agree, right? Like, not everyone is neurotypical. Not everyone has no ADHD, right? Like, I think that we're definitely seeing an environment where people are going to pay the amount of attention that they're going to pay, and we can all help each other out through this.
Yeah, we've had to then, like, we use Confluence and Trello. Well, Trello for meeting agenda items and usually Confluence for collaborative notes. We've had to then realize that you won't be able to get everything done in that meeting, right? And then get more familiar with doing async stuff, right? Like, it's very easy, I think, to sit there and require people to give you an answer during the meeting. Sometimes you won't, and sometimes you just have to sit there and go, cool, we'll get back to that during the rest of the week. Some of that's been healthy, some that hasn't, honestly. Like, not everything you can delay, but that's life.
Cool. Well, I think we managed to get through those questions. I want to thank all of you for spending a little bit of time with us here today, giving us a little bit of visibility into the experience that you've been having. Undoubtedly, these are memorable times, and I think it's also sort of a watershed moment where we're seeing cloud services, online services become critical infrastructure, not to use that phrase too lightly, and the value that y'all are providing in terms of both keeping the services working, but also figuring out how to have your teams be effective and be more productive and keep the lights on. I think I speak on behalf of lots and lots of folks that saying thank you, and I really appreciate it, and keep up the good work. With that, we'll call it a wrap, and hope you all have a good rest of your day.